Welcome to the Mission Minded Podcast. I am your host, Rachel Miller, and I have the privilege of leading this podcast with my best friend and co-host, Bella Comfort. Our mission is to fulfill the Great Commission by bringing our listeners closer to Jesus through each conversation. We hope that through our deep conversations, those who know Jesus can find a new appreciation for Him and His Word, while those who may not know Jesus at all can have a starting place to understand what it means to truly know Him and become a disciple of Jesus. We want to cover everything from the basics to the more complex topics that can get lost in the weeds. So let's dive right in. Welcome back, everybody, to the Mission Minded Podcast. This is an episode that I've been really excited to record because the man behind this is kind of one of the people who have also been walking alongside us for the past 4 years, and somebody who really wanted to start this podcast as well. So I'm excited to introduce Dr. Tim Anstine to the podcast.
Your first appearance.
I know.
We're excited to have you here.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here.
Yeah.
I do have to say, like we said on Sunday, it's one of those like, oh my word, we had this chemistry professor. So chemistry is just a small set of what I do. It's more of bringing reality into the chemistry. So
yeah. And we kind of want to get to know more about like who you are besides the chemistry and also how that correlates into Jesus too. So what are some things that we could dive into?
Well, you're obviously a nerd about Canada and stuff. We know that. But you've also like climbed mountains and like done Ironmans and stuff. Like, have you always done that?
That's actually cool. I do have a whole other side of my life other than chemistry. So yes, I've actually stood on the top of all 10 of the Cascade volcanoes over 10,000 feet.
Oh my gosh.
There's 10, actually there's 11 of them. One of them doesn't count, but I've stood on all 11 of them. So,
That's wild.
Rainier, Hood, Shasta,
Your favorite?
Adams. My favorite's Rainier, just because it's so intense and it's a big mountain. The hardest one was probably Glacier Peak because it was so remote. It took a long time to even get to the mountain.
Yeah.
Oh man.
So it was like a 37-mile round trip, up and back.
So
it was fun.
Do you do all of that in one day?
Or is it a 3-day trip? Yeah.
Just the one peak was
Just
a
one
3-day
peak.
trip.
Yeah,
Okay.
just the one peak.
Whoa,
Yeah.
that's crazy.
So, now that my knees are gone, I don't do that as much. So, but that was a thing I used to do. And the Ironman, yes, half Ironman, I will say. I'm not a full. My wife's a 2-time full Ironman. I'm a
Whoa.
half Ironman. So, but it was cool. I don't run, but I love to bike and I love to swim. So I was like, okay, I can do these, and I kind of just trotted on the half marathon. So
Yeah.
Did you and your wife do it together?
we did.
Oh,
We did.
That's so
So
special.
I was a tiny bit faster on the swim and the bike. She caught me though on the run.
Oh,
Because again, like I said, I kind of trot on. She's actually a runner. So that was fun because she was with a girlfriend that they passed us, and we kind of, for a little while we were together, and they took off. So
That's amazing. Yeah,
Bella, 2 miles on bike.
So, Bella and I took a trip to Mount Rainier one time, and I remember looking at the top because you had told us you peaked it. And I was like, I can't even imagine, like hiking all the way up there. That'd be so cool.
It's so surreal up there. It really.
Do you feel like the outdoors definitely like bring you closer to the Lord too?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I think it was you were saying when you were in the airplane with that just like, Lord, I need something. And you're like, that clouds part. And you're like, oh. So when I'm on a mountain like that, especially Rainier, the big mountains like Rainier and Adams, Shasta, the mountains actually have a personality, which is kind of funny.
Oh.
They groan at night.
Okay.
Because the glaciers are moving.
Whoa.
And you'll hear it's a real deep. It's really, it is kind of, but it's also kind of like you're on this thing that is so powerful.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm, the people on the last time I did Rainier, we had a group of 12, and we're all so tiny little, even though we have 3 tents, we're tiny little specks on this massive.
Oh yeah.
And it just shows the grandeur and the awesomeness of creation and the tininess of the tininess of us.
Yeah.
Which is a kind of a segue into our story. Is we live in this incredibly vast universe. And here people say, well, you're just this little dust speck in the universe as planet Earth. And then you take that dust speck and then you look further, and then the little ants called humans, and it's like, we are so tiny, insignificant. Yeah, we're the pinnacle of creation.
Yeah.
And you think of that, it's kind of like, that is so out there, but yet so close, right? And how do you bring those two together, right?
Yeah.
And that's something hopefully we'll be able to flesh out.
Yes.
Oh, yeah,
as
for
we
sure.
proceed down the road with this.
Yeah. Well, so, I mean, we know you quite a bit just because of college group and us going to Northwest Nazarene University, and now going to church at Eagle Nazarene Church. But I would like our listeners to get a better idea of who you are, your story, and also how you got into chemistry, and then the Lord in between and all through it. Yeah. So I don't know, maybe just start at the beginning. Like, how did you grow up?
Super cool.
Yeah.
So I grew up very similar to you in a pretty normal little Northern California, Redding, true California.
Yeah.
I know in Idaho, California is not a really popular word in Idaho.
I had to clarify where I was from, too.
So like true California. But I grew up in a small city in Northern California. Wonderful parents, both solid believers. My dad was a true man of God. In fact, the reason why I have a high view of scripture is because that was instilled by my dad. My dad was a school teacher. And my mom was city manager secretary. So just a normal blue collar, just hardworking family.
Yeah.
And we went to church every weekend, twice a day.
Yeah.
We'd go in the morning for Sunday school, and then on Wednesday we'd go to school or church as well. So nothing was out of the normal in that until the summer of my junior year, going into my senior year of high school. My dad drowned saving another man's life. My dad was a commercial trawler through the 60s and the 70s, and then so he would teach school during the winter and then fish during the summer. And one year he went over to basically fish, but the ocean was so big and the waves were so massive it was actually eroding the cliffs and houses were falling in. So a bunch of the fishermen went down to help kind of sandbag and try to keep the cliffs from taking his houses. And a guy fell in with one of the cliffs, and my dad jumped in to help save. That guy ended up living. My dad drowned.
Oh my gosh.
So
That's crazy.
that rocked my world. And so because I'm going into my senior year, right, the greatest year of my life. I just come out of. So let me back up one step. You have to know this about me because most people don't know this about me. I was asked to leave high school as a sophomore.
Oh wow.
It was a Christian school in Northern California, and I wasn't a bad kid.
Yeah.
I was at a school where I wasn't being challenged. And my mind, I probably had ADHD, but I was in high school before that was diagnosed.
Yeah, exactly.
So I was just like, I constantly had something, needed to do something, but it was like sit here like this for, 6 hours and just listen. I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
And so I'd find creative ways to entertain myself. They didn't think they were very positive. So it finally came to a culmination in one of my math classes, and when the professor basically said, "So you're out here." And so I was asked to leave the school about 3 weeks before school was out. And that was a private school, small private school. If that moment hadn't happened in my life, I'd have never found chemistry.
Whoa.
So the Lord was totally in the storm.
Oh my gosh.
Because that following fall, I went to the big Shasta High School in Northern California. It was one of the premier schools back in the day.
Yeah.
And I was introduced to chemistry through Mr. Abbott. And that started my journey into chemistry. I would have never had chemistry because the private school didn't have chemistry. Public school did. So that kind of tension in my life brought me into my true passion, which is, as you know, chemistry.
Yeah.
And so it's specifically element number 6 of that. And I do have to say, because chemistry, it's one of those things, we'll talk about this in other episodes, but there's certain things that are really simple. Like chemistry is really simple. If you can count to 118, that's chemistry. Seriously, that's all it is. Well,
I almost failed high school chemistry.
but here's the funny thing, right? We have funny names for like element number 6.
Yeah.
Right? 6 is just carbon, right? 8's oxygen. We have weird names for them, but that's all they are. Right? So it's simple in what it is.
Yeah.
It takes a lifetime to master. And that's something we'll talk about when we talk about our faith. Our faith, the journey in Jesus, with Jesus. Is it simple, but yet it takes a lifetime to master.
Oh,
It takes mentorship. It takes discipline in order to work things out. Where Paul says, work your salvation out. Right? And we'll hopefully talk about that in some episodes of what that looks like. So having chemistry, then my junior year, my dad passing away, drowning, just months later after I graduated, or my end of my junior year.
Yeah.
And then I was kind of, what do I do? I've just lost the anchor to my life. My dad was my hero in life. My dad was pretty much everything.
Oh yeah.
My mom was in the background, kind of, keeping the house running. My dad was really the big personality, the big, driving force of what we did as a family. That was gone.
Yeah.
So I followed what I thought was the right path, which was to go to Point Loma and to do actually biochem.
Okay.
So I've got so I got a dual degree in biology and chemistry. And then after that, I was still wondering, didn't know what to do. And I had a professor who pulled me aside and said, you should go to grad school.
Dang.
I'm like, what's that? Didn't even know what grad school was. So I went off on to grad school.
Okay.
And then that's where I really fell in love with organic chemistry.
Oh, okay.
Organic chemistry as an undergraduate was really difficult because GChem's just math. Like I said, if you got 118, you can do GChem. You have to learn some stoichiometry and balancing chemistry, fun stuff. But it's really just math. Organic chemistry is, as you know, is a real robust discipline on what can this little element number 6 do, right? sp3, sp2, sp, all these funny things that have all these different interactions and interplays. And then you throw in the nefarious nitrogen and oxygen, and it even gets more complicated, right?
Yeah.
So all that, to me, was just like, this is amazing. And I just fell in love with organic chemistry. I was just like, this is it, I'm in.
Honestly, out of all the chemistry classes that I took, organic was my favorite.
Was your favorite?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like, I only took general chemistry in high school, but it was not great. So, like, you redeemed chemistry for me.
Chemistry teachers are so boring. It's,
100%. It's one of those things. Please don't. So many people are like, man, if I'd had you as a chemistry professor, I'd still be in chemistry. I'm like, please don't take these professors because it doesn't have to be so dry, calculated, boring, and pedantic, and you're like, I mean, to me, as most of you know, just in my life, I view the periodic table as a window through which we see the world. Right? As C.S. Lewis said, the purpose of a window is to see something through the wall. The wall is not very exciting. But the window opens you up to a garden or to whatever. And to me, that's what chemistry does. Chemistry, you look at the periodic table, it's 118 elements. So what? But how can I see a broader reality? For me, how can I see the logos of John 1:1? How can I see Jesus through element number 6?
Wow. Yeah.
And so hopefully we'll flesh some of that out down the road. But that was really my journey in chemistry. But my journey with Jesus was one where I ended up in crisis.
Yeah.
You know, and I got to about the end of my college career thinking, okay, I'm still solidly into this Jesus church thing. Was playing keyboards for a worship band and doing the teaching for, voluntary teaching for the high school youth group. But there became this tension.
Yeah.
That on one hand, I'm supposed to be this incredible scientist, and the rest of my chemistry stories, I went to Berkeley for my postdoc in photoorganic chemistry, which was super cool. We can talk about that in a different episode. But at Berkeley, it was science.
Yeah.
Right. And
not a lot of Jesus.
Yeah. Then you have to almost like check your brain at the door because now we're got to be Christians on Sunday and
then now we have science on Monday.
Science on Monday through Saturday, right?
Yeah.
Like there's this disconnect.
Yeah.
And I felt this awkward tension between science and my love of Jesus.
Yeah.
And it kept splitting, right? And it kept going on like there's something missing here.
Yeah.
Right? There's this like almost like this stale, I call it churchianity, that I'm just like, there's no life in this. There's something missing from this. There's life over here.
Yeah.
We're in science. I can have fun. We can explore. We can create.
Like there's facts. I can be like, this equals this.
Exactly.
And there's like evidence.
Yeah. But over here, I was kind of like, so this chasm started to split. And I got to a crisis in my journey. And I don't like the word faith. You guys know that about me.
Yeah.
Because faith, it takes faith to be an atheist, right?
It really.
It takes a lot more faith. But it takes faith, whatever you are, whether you're a theist, a deist, an atheist, those are all faith journeys. It's not like we're the faith journey and they're not.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? And again, that's one of the things I think when we talk about the law of identity, which hopefully we'll talk about in that soon. What do you mean by that, right? The whole
exactly.
But that whole tension that began to split apart, I got to a place in my life when and it came to a crisis. It really did. I'm like, okay, either this is not right, or I'm missing something.
Yeah.
Either I don't really understand this Jesus guy and this Christian journey, or I've been missing something my entire life.
Yeah.
And in that crisis moment, it took me. It took years to go back and say, no, wait a minute. What is, as you, again, one of those things, what is the really real? What is really real? And I can't answer that question through science. Science, I mean, we don't, gravity, you can tell me gravity is really real. You can tell me energy is really real. You can tell me space or time or light. I mean, all these things that we're going to try to bring in to make that's the really real. No, it's not.
Yeah.
We don't even understand light.
Yeah.
We definitely don't understand gravity. We're trying to still figure out how we take Einstein's field equations and the Schrodinger equation and bring them together. They don't like each other, right? There's a war there. So we don't even understand the very foundation of science.
Yeah.
So I can't go there for the really real.
Mm-hmm.
So is it over here? Is it over here with this Jesus person?
Yeah.
And so what I did is I began to go back systematically, work through, okay, wait a minute. Is there a God?
Yeah.
Start there.
Yeah.
I don't even care. Really.
Start with the
Is there
basics.
a God? Right? Let's just start with deism. Let's move from atheism to deism, okay? You can just find over here. Jesus. Atheism to deism, right? So if we go to atheism, all right, no God,
Yeah.
all right, well, that one's pretty easy to check off the box. You cannot be you cannot be an actual sincere scientist and be an atheist. Now, most people don't understand that. We can flesh that out.
Wow.
Most people think, well, science and atheism. No. Science and atheism are horrible friends. Okay, that is a myth.
Okay.
Most people think, well, I have to be an atheist to be a scientist. Wrong.
Yeah.
You can be a very, very sincere deist as a scientist, but atheism, you're going to have tension at the very core of your beliefs.
Yeah.
So the jump from atheism to deism, easy jump.
Yeah.
Tricky one is jumping from deism to theism. Okay? There is a God. The question is he silent? Or does he really care? Or is he out there just doing his own thing in the universe, creating the laws of the universe and letting it run, and we just are little ants,
Doing whatever we want.
yeah, your brains on a stick, just following the probabilities that he set up. So as I walk through that journey of atheism to theism to deism, okay, there is a God. There is a God. The question is, does God have a voice? And that's where this comes in.
Yeah.
Is this truly reliable, accurate, true, as you said in podcast?
Yeah.
Can we really rely on this? Is this objective reality? I mean, we live in the 21st century, right? We're so AI and STEM centric, and you're really going to go back to some old 2,000-year-old narrative that you think is truth?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's something I really want to flesh out, because I think what's lost in our generation is a love for this.
Yeah.
Most students that I've mentored and I've seen in their journeys, it starts to be the questioning, well, is this really true?
Mm-hmm.
And think about the original temptation.
Right.
Yeah.
Did God say?
Yeah.
Right? And we believe that God said. Therefore, this is true.
Yeah.
And once you start to go down that, did God really say that question of doubt, that plants a seed that oftentimes then moves to, devastation, or at least I move from theism back to deism, and then maybe full atheism or agnosticism.
Yeah.
Right? So for me, it was going back and really doing the hard work. Is he there? Does he have a voice? And then does he have a face? And that's where I fell in love with Jesus.
Yeah.
Because on all of my science, in all of my studies, and as you know, I'm just a serious reader.
Yes.
There was one year where I read a book a week, right? And I love to read. It's one of those things. In fact, what I've been doing recently is I've been rereading books. I just finished one of the books I love for the 7th time. Because C.S. Lewis asked something. He said, if that was a great book, why have you only read it once? You're like,
exactly.
Okay, C.S. Lewis, that was a good question. So in my own journey, it's like, all right, that's right. That was such a great book. So I pulled it back out, right?
And also, a lot of listeners do want to know a lot of the book suggestions that you've given us as well, because there's so many good ones. Especially, like for me, Authentic Christianity.
Yeah.
That was a big one that also helped my walk.
Yeah,
as well.
and for me, Meaning of Marriage, I know I've talked to you about this, but it's funny. We read the book before we got married, and then now we loved it so much. Anytime our friends get engaged, we give them.
And they recommend it.
Yeah, no, we buy them and give it to them. We had at one point we bought like 12 books. I saw so many of my friends got engaged.
Oh my God.
And so it's been really fun.
So and I think that's something that we'll flesh out. Like when we go back through, look at all the giants that went before us, right? And for me, it was Stedman and it was Timothy Keller and it was C.S. Lewis and it was Chesterton and I had to get into the philosophy. So I had to get into, really going back into the deep weeds of Christian philosophy, like William Lane Craig and J.P. Moreland, and taking some of these giants and helping me navigate the really real, right?
Yeah.
And so this journey that I went on, which is why I said it took years to find the Logos, the loving voice of Jesus. I had to go back through and put the pieces together for myself.
Yeah.
It wasn't like something, okay, well, my dad said, therefore it's true. It's like, well, yeah, no, my dad's My dad loved me and my dad loved the scripture, but I had to let that tension resolve itself through study. Because one of the things I just was talking to a fellow faculty just not that long ago, and it was tragic because his daughter had gone through the church, and she and her husband were pastors in one of the churches, and now completely walked away from their faith. And it was kind of, well, what did they do to go back and put the foundation together, or to even study it? Right? I use the analogy of my own thinking of like a Lego, right? You go through all the pieces and you build this beautiful whatever car or spaceship.
Yeah.
But when you look at it, you think, that's so cool, I've built it, but what happens if it falls off the ground? What happens if someone comes along and modifies it? I have to go back and undo things in order to put the thing back together.
Yeah.
The question is, how do I know how to make it correct?
Yeah.
Well, that's where we have to have objective reality, right? And so someone in that person's journey has said, this is the wrong picture, right? It's not a spaceship. It's supposed to be a whatever, something different on a car.
Yeah.
So they helped him rebuild this car. It's like, well, wait a minute. What was the original, right, intention of who we are supposed to be? And you kind of hit on the triads.
Yeah.
Right? And when we break down the triads, that omni prime perfectum, right? What are they? Body, soul, spirit. Well, how do we break those down?
Yeah.
That's one of my passions is, like I said, it's to take the simple.
Yeah.
Chemistry is simple. And help navigate how to take the simplicity and make it practical.
Yes.
In our walk.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And I think something that I think it's in our culture, but our generation struggles with is like things being objective. And there's everything in our culture is kind of just subjective. It's your truth. It's like, it's what you feel.
You come up with
and so
whatever you feel like is the truth.
Right.
And, like, especially in the word, a lot of people are saying that a lot of the stories are metaphors and that they aren't accurate. And I know that the Bible is true and like these things happened, and I like want to have some source from science that can back it up too.
So see, what you just did there is so beautiful, because that narrative is so prevalent in our culture today. So if I say to you, don't trust this, what am I really saying?
it's not true.
And?
Don't believe in it.
And?
Don't listen to it.
The hidden one. See, this is where the law of contradiction comes in. If I say, hey, Bella, you can't trust this. Ultimately, what I'm asking, I'm asking you to trust me. You see what happens there? It's like, you can't trust this, but you can trust me.
Yeah.
See, and when we use the law of non-contradiction to say, well, wait a minute, on whose authority do I trust you? That I'm not supposed to trust this.
Yeah.
And what's happening there is so often we have someone that comes along with us and they're doubting, they're questioning. Really, you guys believe those first 4 books of the New Testament? They don't agree. Look at all the errors in those. Well, hold on. I'm all of a sudden taking their authority over the authority. Because remember what happens at the very end of Matthew when Jesus says, all authority has been given to me in heaven, unseen realm, divine counsel, and on earth. Go. Make disciples, right? Teaching them to observe, which is right? And so that's the authority that we've been given. When someone comes along and says, well, you can't really. Really? So you're saying I should trust you over this that's been vetted for 2,000 years? Where did you get your degree? What books are you reading? What teachers are you
credibility?
Exactly. And that's what we need to be careful. Because so often, like I was telling you about that couple with this tragic, their faith is up on the rocks of doubt. Whose authority did they subject themselves to? To say, don't trust. Ultimately, trust me. Trust my way, not the way. And so that is where I want to help navigate out by using the laws of identity, using the laws of thought, using reason, logic, science to point to Jesus.
Exactly, yeah.
Because I think we're in, like you were saying in episode 1, we're a STEM-centric society. How does science fit into this ancient book? Oh, it does beautifully. How does Jesus fit into this? How do we navigate and synthesize a way, the way that leads to ultimately the abundant life?
Yeah. Yeah, and for me specifically, I think is it John 17:11, the way talking about eternal life.
John 17:3.
John 17:3. I knew I was recited it wrong.
17, the great prayer of Jesus. Yes.
Yeah, where it's like, this is eternal life, that we know God and Jesus Christ whom he sent. And that's something that I've really been wanting to focus on, because I want everybody who's listening and us to truly know Jesus, not just know a lot about Jesus. Because that's kind of how I grew up, was I need to read my Bible. I need to learn a lot about him and like know things about him. But it never really clicked until just recently that like, I want to know him.
Yes.
And I want him to know me and have that relationship. And also going throughout high school and science, I feel like, again, it was more, I would hear my parents say certain things and I would hear the church say certain things and I would just kind of believe it. I feel like I wasn't one of those people that doubted too much and I just kind of went with it. But I know there are a lot of people who are science brains and who doubt and who are like, science is so opposite of Jesus. And I want to bring those science people to the reality that they can be so together. Yeah.
Well, there's so much there. I mean, we could just keep on going. When you use that John 17:3 to know, like you said, it's not to know about Jesus.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's to know. And that word there, gnosko, is a real intimate knowledge. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So how do I know Jesus? Because you think of like the theology class, right? What is the study of God?
Yeah.
Right? It's not a mentorship with God.
Mm-hmm.
It's the study of God.
Yeah.
Or gods, if you're in a plural class, right?
Yeah.
And so this idea of studying God. Now, go back to Paul, 2 Timothy 2:15. Paul says, study to show yourself approved unto God, a workman who needs not to be ashamed, handling accurately the logos, the word of truth.
Mm-hmm.
So Paul's telling us study, and the word there in the Greek, it's an ongoing process.
Mm.
If you look at the way the structure of the word study there,
Okay.
it's not something that's just a once and done.
Yeah.
It's something we are to be actively working through, not just reading,
Yeah.
but studying. There's a difference between just reading the word and studying the word.
Mm-hmm.
And so Paul is saying, no. So you can accurately handle the logos, the word of truth, study, put time in. And that's one of the things as our college group is passionate of let's take a word, like we do in our class, one word and break it down to see what that word really means. Or take one verse.
Mm-hmm.
What do we do in John 12:24? Unless a grain of wheat falls in the earth and dies. There's so much there that if we just read the verse, memorize the verse, and move on, we're not really seeing what Jesus really wants us to pull out of that.
Yeah.
And how that comes into our life and changes and makes the way more clear for us to walk.
Yeah.
I know this is going back a little bit, but you mentioned how science and atheism don't work, and how deism and science are actually very complementary. When you were going through your whole education, did you face a lot of backlash for having a faith? Or because I know not everyone thinks that way.
Okay, that's such a great question. And again, it might be a whole episode of the podcast, but I left Point Loma as a theistic evolutionist. Okay. That's what my professors taught. That's what they believed. That was what their professors believed. It was the great way to escape this juxtaposition, this dichotomy, this bifurcation, all these big words of, faith. I'll use the word faith for now loosely. Science and faith, right?
Okay.
You go to the Nacho Libre here. It's like, I don't believe in God, I believe in science. So you're seeing that tension between is it God or is it science, right? So leaving Point Loma, it was, well, here's the way we bring the two worlds together, right? Mm-hmm. We become a theistic evolutionist. Mm-hmm. So God used the mechanisms of evolution to, go from nothing to everything. As I studied that, I have two massive disconnects with that. Mm-hmm. First off, evolution has no place for God. Now, we'll have to break that word down because that is a loaded word. I can give you at least 5 different definitions.
What do you mean by that?
What do you mean?
Yeah. There it is.
Yes, break it all down. When I hear someone say, I don't believe in evolution, say the first thing is what? What do you mean by evolution?
Right.
Because most people are thinking change over time, like smartphones and cars and blah, blah, blah. Things change. People change, right? That's evolution.
Mm-hmm.
But when someone's using that word, and we really need to flesh this out.
Oh, yeah.
When someone's using the word evolution from a scientific perspective, they mean in the beginning was nothing, and out of nothing, everything emerged. Okay, so we've got a lot of explaining to do in that narrative.
Yeah.
So when I use the word evolution, that's what I'm talking about. So when I'm a theistic evolutionist, so I've got this God that did all this, but there's no room over here for him to work. But just believe him because somehow he did. So even the theistic evolutionist isn't consistent because they don't know.
Yeah.
Where does God kick the ball along?
Right.
When we get to something that's improbable, is that where he kicks in? When we
Yeah.
have a problem of homochirality, is that where he kicks in? When we have the problem of forming a polymer in the warm little pond narrative, is because it violates Lachatier's principle, is that where God kicked in? Right? We don't even know where to put God into science. But we just do, right? I'm a theistic evolutionist because
we just believe it.
We just believe it because there's science. Oh, and then there's my Sunday morning stuff, and as I was consistent with both, I'm realizing these don't work.
Yeah.
These are incompatible.
Yeah.
And so for me, I'm a recovering theistic evolutionist. I had to unlearn what I was taught and find, okay, what is the true path? I like to call it the way, right? This is one of those things we talk about. Jesus, I am the way, the truth, and the life. When he says, I am the way, he's referring back to the Old Testament in that. There is a way that led to righteousness. There was a way that led to life, right? You think of the Levitical and the Deuteronomic law. It was like, it's a very narrow path. Over here, you're going to die. Over here, you're going to die. Trust me for the way, right?
Yeah.
And he's saying, trust me. So my question then is, how do I find him as the way in bringing science into my following him?
Yeah.
And so it does not come from theistic evolution, right? To me, it was a cop-out that never worked. It was always had this tension deep inside of me, like, this doesn't work.
Yeah.
It's not logical. It might be a patch,
Yeah.
but it's not a good patch. Kind of like resonance theory with the Lewis dot structure. It's a patch, but it doesn't really explain what the electrons are doing. And so it didn't work for me.
Yeah.
And so to find myself into what narrative, what framework, what idea works to bring the truth of Jesus, the truth that we find in science. Because remember, science is just using my five senses to discover truth about the world around me.
Yep.
It's not almighty.
Yeah.
It never was intended to be. It's just a simple tool
Yeah.
to discover cool things. And, look at your iPhones. That's technology that we got, right?
Yeah.
From following our senses. But it's not all. It doesn't have all the answers. It can't answer itself. And so I realized that science was way too high on a pedestal. And this Jesus thing was, it's completely flipped.
Yeah.
And so I began to put that back together. But like I said, it came through a lot of study.
Right.
I mean, a lot of study and hours reading and studying and wrestling. This isn't something I just come to because someone told me.
Yeah.
This is something I've done the homework.
Where you didn't have this big come to Jesus, like, oh, it's all working now. Like, you had to step by step.
No. And the other thing I would say, Rachel, I was telling you guys at church, I listened to podcasts one. I was like, oh crap, who is this Anstine guy? He's this insane. It was so funny because I don't want, you guys know that, I don't want to be on a pedestal. I really don't. I want to walk with people in the trenches of their life.
Yeah.
Life can be ugly. It can be frustrating. It can be messy. It can be confusing. Right?
Yeah.
So when we navigate together to find the way,
Yeah.
we find Jesus, we find the Logos. Just because I said it's simple, but now it takes a lifetime
Yeah.
to walk out. As Paul said again, work out your faith, work out yourself, work those things out by studying, by spending time together like we're doing. Work that out, like we did it in college group.
Yeah.
Another little group that you guys weren't a part of, but on our campus on a Thursday, we just said, whatever you guys want, let's just talk about it. Let's work things out.
Yeah.
Because I think we need this.
That was something in your chemistry class that I loved, was you would have free-for-all Fridays. So we would talk about whatever random topic we wanted to ask you about, and you're just willing to talk about whatever it was. Whether it was something you truly knew about, but you were like, I'll figure it out too. Like, it was awesome.
Well, and even with that, Rachel, I still did have a tiny bit, just because I'm supposed to be teaching chemistry during those, that free-for-all. But I still like that idea of the tension between faith, philosophy, and science, right? That's where I live.
Yeah.
Faith. What does that look like? Faith in math, faith in science, faith in Jesus, faith in whatever. Faith in the chairs we're sitting in. What does that look like? Faith, philosophy,
Yeah.
right? This love of wisdom. How can we, and then Jesus.
Yeah.
How can we bring all of those together into the little, the tension? Because remember, the university, right? The whole word university, unity in the diversity. What was the unity in the diversity? The only personality that was big enough to unify philosophy and business, chemistry and biology, and was Jesus.
Wow.
So Princeton, Harvard, and Yale had the Logos, Jesus, as the living word that unified all the disciplines.
Wow.
So when he
I did not know that.
you didn't know that? That's where unity comes from.
That's crazy.
So when Jesus got booted out of campus because of the Enlightenment and the Renaissance and all these movements we could talk about, then what replaced the vacuum where Jesus got kicked out of? Well, we did.
Yeah.
And which one of us is big enough to?
Right.
None of us are big enough. So the university actually fractured in these little pockets because there was no unifying principle to bring all the disciplines together, which is why we became more of a pluralistic or an individualistic vicity, whatever you want to call it, not a university.
Yeah.
So for me, Jesus, theology, philosophy, chemistry, Jesus.
All in one.
They all come back together in the person of the Logos.
And that's kind of a good segue to, I want to wrap it around back to how did you get to Northwest Nazarene University? And I know you'll go into this as well, but you've always talked to us about how the Lord put it on you to feed hungry sheep. And I want you to explain that.
Wow. I'm shy with it.
Not a whole lot, but we'll try to wrap it up.
Because we should probably tackle that. My journey to NNU my journey into professorship was kicking and screaming. I never climbed the ladder. Well, so when I did my postdoc at Berkeley, we were the #1 in the world in chemistry. Okay, we beat Harvard out that year, which is kind of cool because Harvard and Berkeley always back and forth. We're the best. But that year that I was there, Berkeley was #1. So came my ego boost. Hey, I'm at the #1 school in the world for chemistry. I made it, right. I climbed the ladder of success in my chemistry world, and I'm a Berkeley. And so, I took that arrogance, that narrative in my own personal journey from Point Loma to Nevada to Berkeley and said, okay, I've done it, right? Here I am, this 27-year-old kid I'm at the #1 school in the world, blah, 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 blah. And my arrogance and my ego took that into industry. And we could talk about developing advanced pain drugs. One of them was Iconitide, which I'm really proud of. I mean, it was the company that I worked for. We were able to find a toxin in a snail, and it became this.
I'm still mind-blown.
It was an incredible journey. But anyway, we could talk about that. But we took that molecule, and it basically, it was 10,000 times more potent than morphine. There was no addiction, no side effect. It was a miracle drug. Okay, so that was the company I was working for. Alon Pharmaceutical. Well, it was Neuroc Corporation when I joined it, but we were bought out by Alon Pharmaceuticals. And when I was navigating that career path, which is what I wanted, I wanted to be the vice president of research. And I was climbing that ladder, corporate ladder. That was who I was. I was defining myself through my chemistry.
Yeah.
And the Lord brought me to my knees. And just literally, I remember the moment I was sitting on the docks of Half Moon Bay with the rain coming down. I'm just like, and for the first time in my life, I sincerely, because I was going through like this, just what are we doing? What is life? Is it really just making molecules? What's the point? Yeah, exactly, right? And I remember just sincerely praying that Isaiah 6, hear my Lord. I see the Lord seated on the throne, that beautiful Isaiah 6 conversation that Isaiah has. And at the end of that, he says, the Holy Spirit, the Trinity says, whom shall I send? Who will go for us? Right? And us there, not me, us, right? The Trinity. And Isaiah said, here am I, send me. And for the first time in my life, I sincerely was like, Lord, here am I. Use me. Do it. Use me where you want me. If it is this path, great. But if you've got something else.
Yeah.
And this isn't going to happen for everyone. That was a Saturday night. That was a Friday night. The next day, Saturday, Dr. Nogales calls me and says, hey, Tim, we've got this job coming open at NNU. Are you interested? I literally said, no. I mean, my path is so, you know what I'm doing down? You know how much money I'm making? You know my stock portfolio? Yeah, right? And as I was like, I was actually sincere about that.
Yeah.
I just said, hey, Dan, Dr. Nogales, hey, just, put my resume just for fun.
Yeah.
And the Lord opened that and made it very clear.
Wow.
That I'm calling you out to take your passion for chemistry, but now to use that to feed hungry sheep. And that's the second part. That's part 2. Because how I learned that was the calling on my life is a very different story.
Wow.
But that was the obedient step of saying, all right, here I am. This is how you want to use me. I'm yours.
Wow.
And so, I start my 27th year this fall.
Wow.
That's crazy.
That's amazing.
By saying yes to a calling on my life.
That's amazing.
Wow.
So.
Well, thank you so much for sitting down with us. It's awesome. I'm so happy to have you.
I know. Unfortunately, we're running out of time, so I feel like we need to cut this one off right now. But let's go more into your mission of feeding hungry sheep into some other episodes too. We have plenty.
I love that. Yes.
All the time in the world.
And so our hope is that we'll come up with some kind of agenda of what we want to start talking about. We'll be praying about it and talking with you about it. But if you feel called to preach something first, let us know and we'll get it out to everybody.
Wonderful. It's such a nice first episode for me, second for podcast.
Well, thank you guys for watching and tune in for our next episode.